Welcome out to our Jitterbit Tech Talk. My name is Jared Stone, and I am extremely excited to have each and every one of you joining us once again today. As always, or as usual, I should say, I have alongside of me Corey Willis.
Absolutely, Corey Willis here. And again, just glad to be here with you guys today, going into yet another Tech Talk here, 2019, our second one of the year, right?
Second one
of the year. We've got some good stuff for you today, right, Jared?
Very good stuff. I don't want to spoil the surprise just yet, okay? But here, just a moment, we will go into some really good topics for today. You probably received a little bit of a notification when you signed up for today's webinar. But before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit about a few Jitterbit University highlights. Okay, so the last time, Corey, we've been working pretty hard the end of last year, the beginning of this year to...
And we've dropped several hints here on the Tech Talk.
We have.
Things coming up.
We have. So around the time that we had our first Tech Talk, we were releasing one of our newer courses connecting to Salesforce. Okay, so lots of good content in there. Some of you have leveraged that already. The response has been quite amazing, to be quite honest. But then we've also since then released another course on creating and managing your APIs. So these are things that we've heard the response from you all, customers and partners, and we want to fill that need. So we've made these courses. They're about 3 hours in time. That's really relative to the individual. But we've created these courses along with quizzes and resources to really assist you and aid you in that integration journey. So
now the API course, this isn't talking about, say, connecting to an existing REST API, right?
That's right.
This is creating APIs on top of your systems. So really cool stuff out there using the API platform. We've done a few tech talks around APIs already.
Sure.
This just goes even deeper. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested, check it out. You can find it in your course catalog. Just click that catalog button. You're going to see all those courses, and those are in there.
Perfect. The one caveat there is, let's just say that you are a newer Jitterbit user. Be sure that you either A, have the knowledge of maybe a foundations or core, which are courses. But if you don't have that knowledge today, you can learn it. So start with Jitterbit Foundations, complete that course, then move on to Jitterbit Core, and then you know what? It's free game. That's kind of how we see it, at least at this point in time. So definitely take advantage of those opportunities, and we'll have some more stuff coming soon on that. So that's kind of a quick update highlight in regards to Jitterbit University. So a lot of exciting things. But getting into today's topic, remember, these topics are coming from each and every one of you. You are making the cry in the wilderness of integration, and we are trying to hear you. And you're relating that information through your maybe CSM or partner alliance personnel. But one thing that we discussed probably, I think it goes back to March of last year, as a matter of fact, was...
I think it was our very first
Tech Talk. I think it was. Ever. I was going to say first, but I didn't want to hold myself to that. But it was around error handling. Now, today we are kind of diving back into that. But we are going to be, when I say dive, we're going to be doing a deep dive, where the pressure really increases. They say get into the weeds. So please understand that as we get into today's conversation.
Yeah, this is not going to be surface level stuff, guys. This is going a good bit deeper than what we typically would go on a Tech Talk. But you guys are asking for it, so we're going to share it. We always say Tech Talks, we talk tech.
Yep.
So we're definitely talking tech today as we dive into this topic. Now, we've talked about error handling, and error handling is really just kind of one part of the trifecta in this whole scenario of additional project design, right?
That's right, yeah.
So we say that when you're doing an integration project, that you should allocate roughly 25% or so of your project design time towards error handling. We kind of put that in a big umbrella, right? But there's more to it than just error handling. I really see that there's three different components. We have error handling, right? And then what we have today, which is
logging.
Yeah. And so that's a big component. And if you have those two right, then the third step of debugging becomes much, much easier. So we will do a future Tech Talk on debugging at some point. I'm not sure our time frame on that yet. But we've done error handling. If you haven't checked out that Tech Talk, go back at Success Central.
Yep, that's the great place to go. We have a video library that you can access every one of our Tech Talks from the past. One other thing, since we are diving into the weeds, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things that you can leverage in your logging journey. We will also be providing in the video section of this course on Success Central a jitter pack. So you can use that, leverage that, use what you want, because one thing that we will be talking about today, it may not necessarily fit what you want to do, but you can take bits and pieces, customize it to fit your needs.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely diving in, like Jared said, diving into the weeds. We're going to be looking at a lot of script stuff. And so rather than trying to, make you pause the video and type that back out, we're just going to share that jitter pack. And so that way you can go back out, you can just download the same jitter pack that I'm going to be showing you here shortly, and we can dive into it.
Perfect. So that's kind of the synopsis as to what we're going to be doing. So let's go ahead and just dive in. I think first we're going to start talking some about standard logging and maybe the differences between standard and what we call enhanced logging.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and pull up my studio here, and I just want to show you something that a lot of you guys you've already seen this type of operation flow. It's two operations. I built this for today's Tech Talk to really just kind of show the principles. So it doesn't matter so much what we're connecting to. Obviously, there's going to be some nuances that come into play at times. Okay, but we're looking at just two operations. Now, the crux of what this is doing, the first operation is doing a database query. The second operation is doing an SFTP CSV file write. Now, I could very easily put these in a single operation. I could have just queried, transformed, and then written the file. And that's really kind of more that traditional approach, I guess you could say. But we've talked on the Tech Talks a lot about doing things to where they're reusable. We've mentioned about using canonical models and things like that. So I kind of brought a lot of this into this, really just bringing in some of that deeper best practice side of things. But the one thing you will notice on this is the green line. The green line, the success line right here. And this is the typical way that we would chain operations together for simple things, right? But if you remember in one of our previous Tech Talks, we did talk about the concept of controller scripts. And so I'm going to bring that back in. But first, I want to show you just, if you do this approach, where this comes in as far as the standard logging. So we've got this. It's already out there. Let's go ahead and do this. So I'm going to have to do several deploys as we go through this. While this is running, I'm going to go pull up my, go into the Jitterbit portal and bring up the management console into the operation logs. And we're going to get to see what it looks like here. And I'm sure a lot of you have noticed what I'm about to show you. But I want to show it anyway so we can level set on where we're going in the near future. So here we go. So let's see. This is the one that just executed. Okay, let me expand this tree out, and what you're going to notice, the second operation here failed. Okay, now I did that by design. There's a little thing I can change in my SFTP setup that's going to cause this to fail. And it's just a real easy flag for me to use for today. But the first operation, it reports as a success because it did succeed. That operation is set to go and pull a query from a database, and we've done that. We pulled the data out of the database, we transformed it into the temporary target. I'm using a global variable for that. Again, referencing back to an older Tech Talk, remember you can use global variables for those small data payloads, typically under 7K or so. If you go over that, you probably want to use temp file instead. We're doing small stuff, so we're using global variables today. But that operation was successful. It did everything it was designed to do. And we told it that when that operation is successful, go run another operation. But that operation failed. So what happens? Well, when we look back at it, the first operation, it reports the status as success with child error. And the second operation is an error. So what would we typically do? Well, we would typically set up error notifications on every operation in the chain. So regardless of where it fails, it's going to notify us. And that's like level 1. That's foundational error handling and notifications, okay? But we're not really getting any enhanced logging with this. We're just getting the standard logging. One of the core principles as we move into enhanced logging is something that internally we call it bubbling up error messages. It's so if you've got a chain of operations, as you go down that chain, if one of the child operations fail, that you may want to go all the way back up to the top, all the way back up to the parent operation, and cause that one to report a failure, an error as well. Let's see how we do it. So now we're going to dive in to what we call enhanced logging. So, like I said, this goes deeper. Let's first remove our success operation. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to back out of this, and I'm going to open up another operation that I built. And this operation here, I just call it my controller. Now, typically I would have a better name on this, but I'm trying to get the point across that this is simply a controller script like we've talked about before.
Sure.
Okay. This is V1. I've got another version I'm going to show you here in a little bit. I do have an error notification email set up off of that controller script, and I have the two operations being called. We do this through the run operation function. Again, we've talked about this before in setting up controller scripts, but I've built in a significant amount of additional logic into this, and we're going to go into this. Like I said, we're in the weeds. We're going to go into this, and we're going to go line by line and explain what's going on here and how you could begin to leverage something similar in your scenarios. Now, as we prep out this, there is one other thing I want to go ahead and mention. I have got a project variable here. I called it jb.core.oplog.write. And this is essentially just a flag. Okay, so this is a flag that we set where we can tell it whether or not to do the enhanced logging. So in this case, I've got this set to true. It's all going to do the enhanced logging. I'll show you why we do that a little bit later. Now, before we dive into the controller, one other thing I want to mention. You see these scripts right here, the logging.op.start, logging.op.end, bookending these operations. Now, this is something I did. We've got several different levels of logging. We didn't really go into this before, but with enhanced logging, we get the ability to do this. Okay, so of course, we've got the fatal errors, and that's kind of the default logging.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can also have just another general error. That might be a data integrity error, something a little more custom. We're not going into transformation errors at this point. But you've got some flexibility there at that error level. So first fatal, then you descend down to error. What was that next one?
Debug is the next one.
That was the next one. So the next one you would have like a debug level where you include a lot of extra information for debug logs. And the final is just information.
Sure.
Just general information. So I put a lot of this different elements in here so you can see it. But here, the logging.op.start, this is just like an info log. All it's doing is it's using this variable here. Now, I created this variable. This isn't a standard variable.
Sure.
It's just a global variable, jb.operation.log. And what I'm doing is I'm going through this. I'm appending into this variable various pieces of information that I'll later decide whether or not to write to the operation log. I'm using the little plus equals just to concatenate, append really is what I'm doing here. So I'm saying whatever's in this variable now, just append this additional info to it. And notice what I've done. Info, colon, starting, and the operation name. It's just an information entry. That's all it is. You don't have to do it. But it might be helpful for you. You might want to do it. So I'm showing you how. So I've done that. At the end, it's very similar. Just say info completing this. Because if you've got a chain of a lot of different operations, I've got some processes out there that they're like 30 operations. And if that process fails in there somewhere, I want to know where in that process it failed, and I want to be able to track that and kind of audit that process. So this helps me do that. Okay, that's all these are doing. But now let's get into really the bulk of what we're going to be talking about today, the controller script itself. This is where we start bringing this in, and it's fairly extensive. I mean, we take a look at it, 65 lines of scripting here. But it's in sections, and I can break it down section by section pretty easy for you. The first section, lines 2 through 12. Again, we're going to share this. You're going to have this jitter pack, okay? But here we go, lines 2 through 12. Initialize enhanced logging. This is the first time that I'm writing to this log variable that I created, the jb.operation.log. We're going to see this over and over and over, okay? But I'm just writing in there, initializing enhanced operation logging, a couple line breaks, and then I start bringing in some information that might be useful to me. If I have an error, if I've got an issue, I need to go back and look, I might want this information in a consistent way. You may not. You may want to keep your log files more concise. That's perfectly fine. I'm just trying to show you options. Okay? But notice what I've got. The the organization. Let's start with the organization that I'm working in. Most of you are only going to have one, unless it's the training sandbox or something like that. But I work in multiple organizations, so I want to know what organization this was tied to. And so I use some native Jitterbit functions, get organization name and get organization ID, and I can put that information right into my log. Next is my environment. Same thing, the environment name, the environment ID. It's going to tell me whether this is my dev environment or production environment, back and forth, okay? Then the agent group, then the agent, and then the agent version. And then finally my project name. Now why would I want all this? Well, it gives me one concise place where I can create this log entry, be able to go back and parse that without having to look in multiple places. It bubbles it all up to the top. And it puts all my info right there. Let's imagine I've got an operation that's been out there running, everything's been running great for months, and all of a sudden something changes. And something's not working right. Now we got to go find out what it is. And let's be honest. You know, I mean, we hate to admit it, but it does happen. It happens in every software. Sometimes bugs get introduced in new releases. So let's say you're sitting there and you're going, oh my gosh, there was another release. You know, maybe there's a new bug out there. But you go look at your logs and you go, oh wait, no, that was actually running on the same agent version that it was 3 days ago when it was working right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it was working right 3 days ago. It's working wrong now, but it's the same agent version, the same agent group, same environment, same organization. Now we've ruled something out, simply because we put the information in the logs.
Sure.
That kind of gives you an idea. Okay, but hey, maybe it's the other way around. You go, hey, it worked great on this version. It's not working great on this version. Maybe I'll just roll back my private agent. Who knows? It gives you the power of the information. Okay, so that's that little section. Now I'll scroll on down, and then we get into where we're launching the database customer query, is what I'm doing. Okay, get that off screen. There we go. So I start on line 17. If you look up in Success Central the documentation for the run operation, there's some information there about kind of how to debug and you know, capture some of this stuff. There, it's right there. And that's what I built this off of, expanded it ever so slightly. But we start with reset last error. And this is going to, if there were any errors previously that we handled, it's just going to clear those out. And we're going to use that in a little bit. The next thing is I do the run operation function right here, but I do this inside of an eval function. Now, typically I use eval functions for database queries, because if that database query fails for some reason, maybe I want to give it a default value instead, because I do these a lot inside of transformations. You know, different things out there. Okay, so I almost always will do a database SQL statement within an eval. Here I'm putting run operation. Now, if you look at run operation, I'll go ahead and pull this up. If you look at the docs on this, and you scroll down here, right here we see returns false if the operation could not be added to the queue. Now that's pretty much a fatal error, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to do something for that. We want to log it. We want to handle it.
Exactly.
Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen it happen. You tell it to run the operation, it gets added to the queue. I don't think I've ever seen it happen in what, nearly 8 years of working with the Jitterbit platform. But why do we do error handling? Why do we do the logging? We do it for those scenarios that could never happen.
Sure.
So let's go ahead and handle it. So I wrap it in eval. And what this is going to say is that if this returns as false, if it doesn't get added to the queue, then I get to decide what to do. So here's what I've done. Right here. And I put it in the comments because, again, we're going to share the Jitterpack. I want you to be able to go back and look at it and see what's out there. So I tried to over-comment this. I probably wouldn't put this many comments in if it were my own, but I wanted you to be able to understand it. So if the operation fails to start, append running enhanced operation log. So that running log, that variable jb.operation.log, that's what I'm appending to right here. It is. And again, just using that plus equals, and I'm saying fatal operation. And I bring in this local variable. Now you may say, where'd that come from? Well, that comes from right up here. In the run operation, I'm assigning the GUID of the operation to this variable, local variable. And then I can call it down here. So I'm saying operation and then that operation GUID, and it failed to start. So I'm putting that information into that log file. Then the next thing is I say, if that oplog write project variable, remember the one I showed you? If it's set to true, here we see it, if, and there's the variable, so if that comes true, then what do I want to do? Then I want to write to the operation log. Why would I put this in? Well, we may not always want to write all of this stuff to the operation log, right?
Sure.
There might be times that we say, you know what, everything's running great. I want to turn off the enhanced logging for right now. maybe that improves performance. Maybe it's for data storage issues. It could be for any number of reasons. So hey, we put the flag in there. We put in the switch. You can turn it on, turn it off. It will. Change it in the management console. It's easy.
Sure.
So here I'm just saying if that's true, which mine is currently, then go ahead and write it out to the operation log and then raise an error. So this is the error handling side of it here, but we raise the error. Again, we put in that operation GUID and we say that it failed to start. So there's that. That's if it fails to start. Now, what if it fails to complete? What if there's an error within the operation executing? That's the next section. Line 28, error, just capturing this to a global variable, is get last error. Remember the global or the function that I used. Reset last error, right up here on line 17. Reset last error. Now I've ran an operation. If there was an error, then it would be populated in this get last error. Then on line 30, I say, let's check the length of that global variable to see if something's there. Because if there was no error, that's going to be null. The length's not going to be there, and I just pass up this portion.
Sure.
But if there was some sort of error, that's going to be populated. What do I do with it? Well, I add it to my running enhanced error log variable, bring in that error message and a line break, and I also come in here and I say if my project variable, if my switch is turned on, go ahead and write it to the operation log, and then raise my fatal error. Same type of thing. Now, the next that finishes the first operation. The next operation, I add a little bit more, but not by much. You'll see the same logic going on here. Reset last error. Then we have the eval. Then we've got the oplog. The append to the oplog. But right here, line 44. This is the new piece because in the first operation, I'm doing a database query, writing it to a global variable. If something fails there, in my world, that's not really a big deal. Okay, my big deal is if the first operation succeeds and I get the data out, but my second one fails.
Sure.
That's a bigger issue to me. And it might be both, and that's fine. You can use the same logic. But what I'm doing here, because I'm using that global variable, let's go back. I'll show you. Let's recap this. I'm using the global variable right here as my target. Then I'm using the global variable in the second operation to pull the data back. Because I'm doing that, it makes it very easy to simply say, write this out to the operation log using that global variable. What am I doing? I'm doing a data dump. Okay, because you may not want to do this. That's fine. One thing I will say, if you're going to do any sort of data dump, be cautious. Just understand that if you're running on the cloud agents, that data is going to be stored in the cloud. If you're running on a private agent and don't have secure logging turned on, that data will be stored in the Jitterbit cloud. Okay. Now there's security around it. Obviously, it's going to be yours. But I understand some organizations have very strict data residency requirements. This would not work with cloud logging.
Sure.
That's why we have the private agent secure logging function. You can put that out there. It's going to be stored on that agent. Okay. But that's what this is. If you want to do a data dump, this is how we do it. So then we go on here. If that project variable is set, go ahead and write it to the oplog. Now again, this gives you that ability. You can flip that switch. All this is turned off, but it's still there. Very convenient. And then raise the error. Okay, now this is again if it fails to start. Then we go on just like the other. If it fails to complete, we do the same logic essentially. Then the last thing that we do down here is we say, hey, if that's turned on, go ahead and write it. This is basically the if it's successful, go ahead and put the logging out there. And that's what we're doing. So let's see the result. That's a lot of pieces there in the script. I get that. But let's see the result, okay? Now in this case, it is going to fail. And so we're going to get the failure. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy, execute this. It's going to go out there. It's going to run. That first operation is going to be successful. The second operation is going to fail. But our parent operation, the controller, is now going to return an actual error because we told it to. We did the raise error. We did the error handling, which we've talked about the error handling before to some extent. We're going a little deeper in it because it all ties together, but we're focused on the logging. What's the data that we're going to get? So as soon as this returns here, we're going to see it. And as well, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my operation log here. And it looks like we've already gotten it back here. So there we see, there's the query all. That completed successfully. You see the green checkbox. The write failed. Now because of what we have done, it caused the controller script to also report an error, a failure status back here. Let's look at what we got in the logs, because that's what we're talking about.
That's right.
Now, of course, we get the fatal error. What I'm more concerned with is down here. This messages logged in scripts. This is what we're writing out to the op log. This is the enhanced logging. Initializing enhanced operation logging. There's our information. We see we're running on agent version 9421 in the Jitterbit Production Cloud agent group. We see our project name. And then here we see info starting the query all. So we're starting the database query. We're completing the database query. Okay, great. That went perfect. Now we're starting the customer write. Now we get the run operation failure. Failed to put the local file, and then we get all of the debug information out of that. And what we actually see here is that we had a file rename error. That's the little flag that I'm using. I've already got the file out there, so it's not going to be able to rename to an existing file.
Sure.
But then look here. There's my debug information that I included. I get the CSV output of what was going to be written to my final. Now I haven't lost my data. It hasn't gone into the black hole.
Sure.
I've got it somewhere. It may not be where you want to put it. You may decide to put it somewhere else, but hopefully the concepts are transcendent.
Sure, yeah.
And show you some stuff. So, oh my gosh, I know that was a lot.
No, it's a lot of information, but a lot of good information. So maybe someone just hopped on in the last few moments or so. What we just covered was standard versus enhanced logging, is what we're calling that. And then we jumped into and talked some about the different tiers of logging. Not crying tears, because we're making you happy by doing this, right?
Yeah.
But tiers of logging being fatal error.
Tiers of logging is when you fail
That's
to
right.
log.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're up the creek, right?
Yeah. Well, they say you fail to plan.
Sure.
Then you plan to fail.
Exactly.
It's the same with logging.
That's very true. And it kind of goes back to that whole devoting a quarter of your time, 25%, to this specific area, because it's really going to increase your efficiency and effectiveness from that point on.
Yeah. And I will say, if you've never done it before, like if you haven't gone in here and really done the error handling and logging side of things, it might take you a little more time the first time.
Sure.
But we can also make stuff a little more reusable, right?
Yes, that's right. This is my favorite part, which I told Corey. So he's going to jump into logging reusability, which is really cool.
Because that script, that was what did we say,
67 lines.
67 lines of script out there. But a lot of that logic I might want to use in other areas.
Sure.
I might want to use it in other operation flows. So how can we bring in more reusability? Because that's one of the big questions we get asked a lot too. So I'm going to show you in this context how to do reusability. And I'm going to do it simply by dropping in a variation of the script. But here it is, controller V2. Let me drop that in. It does the same thing. It does the exact same thing. But when we look at this one, 21 lines. 21 lines, and it does the exact same thing. Because we're leveraging reuse, I'm doing things like run script throughout here, calling these other scripts. Where are those at? I created a little folder over here of logging. So now I have this logging initialize script. You remember when we initialized all the basic info? Well, now we call it here with one line. And if we take a look at that script, there it is, the same logic. But now I've got it in one place. I can reuse it 1,000 places.
Sure.
And if I decide, you know what, I need to go change something in that logging logic, I change it one place, and it's done.
Yep.
Okay, so there's that one. Now, as I go on down, I've got a few others here. There we've got the op start and the op end. We saw those already. Those were in the operation itself. Okay, but we've got things like run op failure, run op error log, and op log write. So let's dive into some of these. Again, it's the same logic, so we're not going to be talking about the logic, just the reusability side.
Sure.
But first we come down, line 5, launch the database query. We reset the last error. We still do that here. Okay. Then we do the eval run operation. We're still doing that here. That allows us to tie in that specific operation. I'm using this variable for it again to kind of carry that GUID through a few other areas. If I did this in a different way, the operation could potentially disappear from this. I want to see it, so I left this. We can talk about that later if you're curious. If you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, I've got 1,000 operations on screen. How do I clean that up? How do I get those to disappear? I can go into that if you're curious on it. But then I do the first run script, and this is the run op failure. So this is the failure to run the operation, the failure to start. Remember that bit of logic? Okay? When we have that bit of logic, that failure to start, now I can pull that logic out, and it's here in this script. Now, I start this with argument list. If you haven't done run script very often, this is actually really powerful. I mean, this, when I learned this several years ago, I was like, oh my gosh. This basically enables you to make custom functions. I mean, we don't use that verbiage. We don't use that terminology. But you can put any logic you want in here. And you can run the script with parameters being passed in. And then you can return something from it. Now, these aren't returning. These are just passing in the data. But I'm passing it in, and I'm going to initialize it as an operation variable that's going to have that GUID. And then I have dump. And what this is basically a way that I can tell this script whether I want it to do a data dump or not. Because I might have certain operations I want the data dump. Sure. Certain operations I don't want a data dump. So I just put a flag in, put in a switch. But as I go down there, you see the operation log, putting my data there that I want. And then I do a little if statement. If that dump variable is set to true, then go ahead and do the debug dump. And then I go on down and run script. Now I'm running another script from a script that I'm running. Got this chain of operations. But what this does, this right here, if I take a look, this is the oplog write script. Just puts in that little switch logic. If that variable is set, write it to the operation log. Why would I break this out? Well, I might want to use this for something else. I might want to use this logic, or I might want to say, you know, later on, I want the ability to be able to go in and add logic to this portion without having to change it in 1,000 places. Mm-hmm. So I break it out. It makes it just easier to maintain. Then I go down and do the raise error. Now, could we break out more of this? Oh, you could break out as much as you want to do. But, you know, this is just, again, just trying to show you the concepts, trying to show you the principles that are out there. So there's that one. That's if it fails to start. Then we go on, we say, okay, well now let's run this script for the error log. So let's look at that one. Again, I'm bringing in the operation GUID and the dump flag. I'll go back and show you where those are brought in here in a moment. But this is where I now do my get last error. And I say if that error is greater than 0. Same logic. Same logic we looked at before, but now brought in. Do everything else just the same here. Okay. Nice. Now where I brought those parameters in is right here at the end of run script. Run script, what script it is, and then any parameters that you want to pass to that script. So I'm saying there's my operation GUID that I pulled here from line 7, and I'm saying false. In this one, I don't want to do a data dump. But in the next one, we just do the same stuff. So I'm not going to go through it all again. We just do the same stuff. The only difference is now I'm saying, yes, do a data dump. And then I do my final oplog write again, bringing in that final flag. Do I want to write this out? So now we've changed this up. Now we've only got 21 lines of script out here. Let's see what this does. It's going to do the exact same thing. It really is. It's going to do the exact same thing. Here in a minute, though, I'm also going to do just a few other variations of this. We're going to be getting to Q&A here in just a few moments. So if you do have questions, let us know. Okay, we make a commitment to you that we're going to stay on as long as we possibly can, as long as you have questions. So if you have questions, send them over. We will do our best to answer them. We don't always have every answer. But if we don't have the answer, we'll get the answer and follow up with you. We do make you that commitment. Okay? So there we go. That's running. There we get the failure. And if we take a look at it, here we go. Same stuff. There's all those messages. There's my debug output. Everything's there, just like it was before, but now in a much more reusable fashion.
Yeah.
Okay? What if it succeeds? This is the cool thing for me. I don't know. But I can go into this. I'll turn off that little FTP rename. That's what was causing this error, because I already had the file out there. I wasn't cleaning up my files. And so this is just going to allow me to overwrite the existing file. But now I'm going to have a success, and I'm going to show you what data we get there. Because if it's success, we shouldn't get the debug output, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was written. And we shouldn't get all that error information, but we should get our little audit trail,
Sure.
of what happened now. So there we go, success with information. There we have it. There's our initial enhanced logging. What organization, environment, agent group, agent version, what project, and then our little audit trail. Starting this, completing that. Starting this, completing that. It changes. What if I don't want the logging? Well, I just change this project variable to false. Now I'll run it again. It's just going to give me a success without the enhanced logging. So just some different things that we kind of brought together here. We'll see this one here, and there you go. So no additional information, just that it completed successfully, simply by changing that flag. So Jared, could you imagine in some of the processes that you've worked on, if you had this level of logging? Because I know a lot of times internally, let's not admit it, I guess, but sometimes we just get stuff done. Right?
Of course, no.
And I think everybody does. We don't always set aside that 25% if it's something real small and hey, we just need this done. And the next thing you know, it's been running for 6 months and it breaks and
What do I do? Type deal, right? You don't know what to do. So
I mean, we've been there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So having this available, enhanced logging, really can be it can make the difference between getting back in production in a timely manner if something happens and not getting back in production in a timely manner. Mm-hmm. Having to call in another subject matter expert, going through all of these different troubleshooting, adding additional stress. I mean, just so many different things that kind of come in when you don't have that enhanced logging capability going.
Sure.
So I know we've got a slew of questions out there, I'm sure. So I'm going over to my questions now. And
while you're going over that, Corey, just really quickly to give some more time there, Micah, if you would, throw up our resources really quickly. And that'll give us just a moment to kind of start looking at these questions as well. But you can see there on the screen, here at Jitterbit, we are about next steps. Wherever you are in your integration life cycle or journey, we want to make you as successful as possible. You can see the first one here on the screen is success.jitterbit.com. That is for Success Central. That's our documentation website. So anytime you have questions, what is this? What is that? Will this work? That is the best place to go first. Obviously, there may be times for you to reach out to support or whatnot, but try there first because there's a ton of great information out there in regards to the Jitterbit platform. The next thing there is Jitterbit University. So like we talked about, we have a lot of great courses for you, a couple of certification opportunities as well for you to leverage. So when you have time, be sure to check that out. If you maybe have not enrolled in Jitterbit University and want to, reach out to your customer success manager or your alliance manager, either one, and they'll get you the download on that. And then finally is the Jitterbit community. So, like we said earlier, we're not perfect. We're evolving as far as the product goes. Maybe you have input or suggestions on how to make Jitterbit better. We want to hear about that. And the Jitterbit community is the best place to go for that. So you can give your ideas out there. And then, vote on those ideas. So if you see someone else that throws a really good idea out there, well, you can vote on that. And, maybe down the line in future releases, that's something that will come about. So just a few resources for you all on this. So getting back over to Q&A now. So
Q&A. I'm actually just seeing if I can demonstrate one of these now. Let's see if I can pull this in. We may have to go back to that one in a moment. So I'm going to start with we've got questions that just kind of run the whole spectrum of topics here, and that's perfectly fine, okay? Your question does not have to be related to today's topic. I promise you that. But I am going to start with ones that are related to the topic here, and then we'll branch out to some of these others that have come in. Let's see. Okay, let's start. There was one question here about what are alternative approaches to track the errors rather than email notification. Okay, so there also are some alternative approaches. They do take a little bit more work. Email is by far the easiest, but it doesn't work for everybody in every situation. I understand more people are going to more messaging platforms like Slack. We can bring in Slack integration. Okay, so you could let your errors go to Slack. What you would do in the studio, rather than doing an on-failure email, you would do an on-failure operation and have that operation doing your Slack integration to put that over into your Slack channel. So Slack would be one. With that methodology, you could do anything. Okay, you could do anything out there with an API, a database. You just think of it like another integration. It's just you're handling errors with it instead. Let's see, another one that I've heard of is, like going out to a JMS message queue. Maybe a little atypical for errors, but I have heard of it. Let's see, some others. Databases I've seen often. Of course, email, it's a standard. Slack, I'm seeing more and more and more. There's also other platforms out there. We've got customers that you're using already. Various logging and error handling platforms. And so again, just kind of like we would do the Slack integration, we would just integrate to that platform, either through a REST API or some other standard method of integration. But that's typically the way. I've even seen SMS integrations.
Sure, yeah.
And sending a text message. Now it takes a little bit more because it's not standard in the product necessarily. But we've got people doing it today in production. It's quite simple to do. So that's that. Let's see here. There was a question about the difference between the variable jitterbit.operation.previous.error and the getLastError function that we used. These get a little tricky. There's another one in there. There's a jitterbit.operation.error. That variable, the jitterbit.operation.error variable, and I think previous error fits into this as well. Works really well for going into emails, going into the notifications is where I tend to use those. So if I'm doing an immediate error notification, I'll use jitterbit.operation.error in the email, just as something quick and simple. If I'm doing something that has an error handler operation, then I might use the previous error. I believe that one carries through. The getLastError function, to me, is just a lot more flexible if you're in the script pad already. If you're already in the scripting side of things, that one, it just has a lot more flexibility. You can do the reset error, and that one, ultimately, they're getting error messages. And they're all just various ways of getting those error messages. So hopefully that answers the question there. There was a question about, can you post the scripts? Absolutely. They're going to be in the Jitter pack. They're going to be out there. Our plan, we should have probably ran this by the doc team before we said we were going to do it.
We did it before, so
okay,
48 hours. 48 hours, we'll have that up and going.
So yeah, it should be out there on Success Central. So just go out to Success Central in a couple of days, and you will see the Tech Talk posted out there.
Sure.
And the Jitter pack should be right there with it. And that'll have every bit of that we went through today. So you can see all of that for reference and pick it apart and figure out where I messed up. Hopefully not. So there's that. Let's see. I think we had... Just looking through here. So here was one, debugs. Now this kind of crosses over from kind of the debug logging side of things over into API. Okay. But debug mode, I'll say, is limited on operations and APIs for up to 2 weeks. Can this be increased? Not currently. Okay. The reason for that is just the amount of data that can be generated there. So we do put a limited duration on that debug log. And what we're talking about, if let me see if I can get back here to it. If we switch back over to the studio real quick, we have an option here in the operations where you can enable this debug mode, and I believe that that's what we're talking about. If I tried to go, say, up to the 28th, it's going to say it must be in 2 weeks or less from today. That is what it is, okay? And the reason is just the sheer amount of data that we have seen generated in the debug mode stuff in the past. So there's that. So let's see if we can go back over. See, I think you cleared that one out for me, Jared. Thank you. Can we talk a little bit more about secured logging and the cloud agent? Absolutely. So if you're running on the cloud agent, group, all of your logs will go to the Jitterbit cloud. If you are running on a private agent, something that you install, it can be, we call it private agent because it could be local, it could be hosted in the cloud, it could be on an EC2 instance, it could be on Azure, it could be anywhere. Okay? I mean, heck, we've got Docker out now too. Pretty cool stuff. You're going to see some training on that soon too. So you can put that agent about anywhere. If you're running a private agent, there is an option, and let me see if I can, I don't know if I've got this set up in here or not. I'm going to go see if I can show you. See if we can load this up here. There we go. We're getting somewhere. Okay, let's go ahead and switch over to my screen. So I'm in my Tech Talk org, and over here I'm going to go to Agents and Agent Groups. And now I've just got the standard cloud agent groups, but if I do a new agent group, right here, see this option, enable cloud logging. That is on by default. That's going to send the logs up to the cloud. If you turn this off, those logs will remain on your agent machine. And some of you are probably sitting there going, okay, well that sounds great and secure, but really hard to get to. Don't worry. If we did this, we could still actually access them through a web browser as long as we are on the same local network. Okay, I know this gets a little tricky. I get this. Okay, but what it does is it stores the logs on the local agent, on the private agent, and then when you go into the operation log and you see that there's additional logs, you can click to download those logs, but that link is going to give you a link directly to the Jitterbit agent machine, so you have to be on the same local network or at least some sort of VPN, some connection directly to that machine, and you can still get them through your web browser. Okay, so it makes it a little bit easier to work with, but that right there, that's the option, is that enable cloud logging. And now, like I said, that's on by default. That sends them up to the cloud, makes it really easy to work with, but we understand for various reasons, data integrity, data security, data residency concerns, some of you may not be able to do this, especially if you're doing the data dumps. Okay, so we understand that. That's why we've got that option, but it does require that, that private agent scenario. So let's see, lots of questions today. I love this. I love when we get the interaction. And guys, we're getting close to the top of the hour, but like I said, we'll stay after the hour.
Sure.
Okay, we'll stay after the hour because we want to get you the questions answered as best we can.
And one thing to add in regards to that, if you do have to leave and you have a question, maybe it hasn't been answered or whatnot, feel free to follow up with us in an email as well if you haven't typed that in just yet.
So we've got an email address. We can throw that up on the screen here, training@jitterbit.com. It's lower down there in the deck. Nope. Okay, so we don't have that. But it's easy. Training@jitterbit.com.
We'll put that into the chat panel as well.
So you can always email us, and we'll do our best to get you an answer. If it's not directly training related, we may direct it over to support and let them answer it for you, but we'll get you the question answered one way or another. Also, if you've posted your question here and you have to drop off, feel free to always come back and check out the video, because we'll probably have it answered in the video. So there it is. Jared sent that out in the chat, training@jitterbit.com, if you just want to do a nice little copy and paste. Okay, so going on here. So here's a question as far as the debug mode that we were just talking about. Do I need to republish the API every time after increasing the debug mode date? Micah, do you know? Yes. Yes. I'm being told yes. That's what I'm being told by our producer Micah, who has done a lot more in the API side of things recently than I have. So I am being told yes on that. So hopefully that gets you a nice answer there. Let's see. We had a question here about a connector for connecting specifically to the Azure Blob storage to store logs. I don't know of a connector currently. I will say in the coming months you're going to see a lot of really cool stuff coming out with things like a connector builder, connector SDK, a lot of new connectors coming in. I haven't heard of this one in particular. It doesn't mean it's not going to be on that list. We don't have anything necessarily today on that. But again, just because we don't have a connector to something doesn't mean that you can't connect to it.
Right.
I will say some of the blob storage stuff gets a little tricky in how it stores, whether it's binary or base64, or et cetera, et cetera. That one, I would suggest on that question, that might be a good one to actually email support@jitterbit.com on, if they have a recommended way to connect to that particular endpoint, and they can get you connected with somebody there. Again, feel free to send it to us. We can move it on too. Okay, so now getting into some of the other things. Here's one. I see that the Jitterbit agent uses Postgres SQL. Does it store logs locally before sending over to the Jitterbit cloud? I do believe so. I do believe that they are there. So if you want to do something, we typically don't recommend interacting with that database directly. Is it possible? Absolutely. I've done some really stupid stuff with it. So yes, you can do some stuff with it. But yes, I do believe that it is stored in that database. There are some additional things that are stored on the temporary file system as well with the agent when you're doing a private agent. So there is some interaction with that. If you've got specifics on that, support's a great place to go on that. And they can tell you exactly which directory is used for what and where in the database. Sure. and things like that. They can get all the specifics on that. Okay. So going back up to some of these other questions that weren't necessarily directly related to the topic. Like I said, we were going to stay on and do these. We're here now. I promise you. So here's one. And I'm not sure the answer. I may have to follow up on this. But the question is, how do we unpublish an API? Basically, move it back to draft. I was actually trying to pull this up. I've got an API. Had. Let me see if I can get logged back in, and we'll just do some exploration and see if we can find it. But okay. Yeah, my internet's flaking out a little bit there on that machine. So I'll have to follow up with you on that one and see if we can get you an answer on what the best way to do that is. So let's mark that one, if you don't mind, Jared, sure, as far as a follow-up, and we'll check that. Here's a good one that I do like. What are best practices around storing environment variables? Okay, something that's relevant to the entire environment, not necessarily just projects, without having to redefine them in all the projects running in that environment. There are a couple different ways that you can do this. I've seen people use databases and then do a script that'll read the system settings in from that. That was kind of an older way of doing it. Project variables really tend to be the simplest way, but that is project specific. Okay, Now down the road, you'll probably see a new feature come in that's more focused on true environment variables. I'll tell you a really interesting way that I've seen it done today is that you have a single project that is your environment variables project. And in that project, you set all of your all of your project variables. And then you have a single operation, and honestly, that operation could be a blank script. It doesn't have to do anything. And then in all of your child operations, the other projects within the environment, you do a run script from project, or run operation from project is the function.
Okay.
Run operation from project, and you call that other project, and call that dummy operation. But when you do that, it loads every one of those project variables into your current project. So you would just initialize each operation chain with that. It's kind of an interesting way of doing it, but I'm seeing people do that, and it is simplifying things. That way it is still stored within Jitterbit. You can still go out to the management console and make changes without having to log into an external system, without even having to log into the studio, some different things. So hopefully that gives you kind of a workaround there if you have that need to have environment variables beyond in multiple projects. Okay, so there is that one. Let's see, this one, probably need to follow up on this one as well. I'm just going to look over it real quick, but it's getting into some specifics around URL decode function against a variable. Just trying to look at this. Gotcha. So yeah, this is around some very specific things. I'm going to follow up with you on this question after the fact, so we can dive into some more specifics on that. So we got that one marked, Jared?
Yeah, marked.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Here's one about a JavaScript script. It's always an interesting JavaScript script. Let's see. To send email. Okay, I think this one's actually from the same individual. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, JavaScript is not my forte, so I'll have to get with one of our other teammates that is more of an expert in the JavaScript side of things. But we've already got a couple other things we're going to follow up with you on, so we'll add that to the list there for you. Okay? So here's a couple others that I may not have an answer to. It happens, but we'll get the answer.
That's right.
We'll find the answer. It helps me grow, right? What's the maximum size of payload that we can send through an HTTP request to the Jitterbit API? I don't know. But I'll see if I can find out and let you know. Okay? So we got that one marked as well there, Jared? Mm-hmm. Perfect. So here's one where, and I'll tell you, this one where I'm probably going to recommend that you reach out to support on this, but let me go and read the question in case there's anybody else. We have an operation that's not being called, although we can see the request coming in through the API log. So the API is being hit, the API is being told to trigger the operation, but you're not seeing the operation actually run. I don't know offhand. We're going to have to look at that, okay? And that's why I would say I recommend following up with support. Just send an email, support@jitterbit.com. They'll probably set up a meeting with you to look at your specific configuration, at your project, and help you debug that, figure out what's going on. I can't think of a reason offhand why that would happen. I mean, if there were the things that keep coming to mind, it wouldn't make sense. Like if you had a method not allowed, it would actually show a method not allowed. So I'm not sure on that one offhand. I would want to dive in and start getting hands-on, and support's going to be your best bet to do that. Okay. And for anybody out there, if you run into those situations, you've got specifics, then just get up with support. They can dive into your project, get on a meeting with you, get on a Zoom screen share, and look at it. So here is one Again, I'm probably going to say support on this one because I'm not. This just isn't. I'm doing this a lot today. I'm not used to this. I'm used to knowing the answers.
Yeah.
But it's a Salesforce bulk update, and they're saying that it fails, but we are not getting notified. How do we handle this? Again, support would be the way to go on that because they can do the research and find out. There's got to be a way. I'll say that, but I don't know offhand. So let's see. We answered that one. Now here's a good one. How do we handle Salesforce update or insert failures in the connector response? You're going to have to do some stuff there. Okay. We do not, if you're doing an upsert, it makes it very easy because you can do all sorts of success and failure files and emails within the connector. If you're doing an insert or an update, they do behave differently, and you'll have to go into the response transformation itself and see where those error messages are coming back in through the actual response and do some stuff with it there. It's a little more complicated. Upsert is typically the recommended approach. I understand there's certain scenarios where you want to make sure it's an insert or an update, but they are more challenging to handle. But you have to do that in the response transformation. Okay. Well, I think we're at the end of the question list, and we're only 4 minutes over.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
It's pretty decent. Yeah.
For the question volume we had, guys, thanks for sending those over. I apologize. I didn't have. I don't feel like I had many answers for you today, but we're going to do the research. We're going to get you connected with the right people, and we're going to get you the answers. And hopefully that's acceptable to you. I wish I had more answers for you today. But I hope that the session was good for you. I hope you learned some more about logging. And, of course, we did some more debugging stuff within that. Not debugging. We're going to do debugging.
That's the
error handling.
Error handling.
Error handling. Mm-hmm. So hopefully you found it as a value to you. Remember, do the error handling. Do the logging. Now, the level of logging, you may want to do a little less. That's fine. But do some logging. Reuse as much as you can, whether it's reusing operations, reusing scripts, reuse as much as you can. Okay, and we showed several other little things in there as far as best practices like controller scripts and using global variables when you're dealing with small data that you're passing from operation to operation. So with that, guys, anything else, Jared?
Nothing from me. So we just appreciate once again each and every one of you taking the time out of your very busy day to come sit with us, and we'll have this out in the next couple of hours. Follow up with a few of you that we need to follow up with, and until next time, I guess we'll see you in about a month or so.
Sounds great.
All right, take care.
Yeah, have a great day.